being 6:31, I'll call this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee to order, and we'll start with a call of the roll.
So, Suresh Bhatia.
Present.
All right. Peggy Briggs.
Present.
Kathy Quoklo. Eric Dahlberg.
Present.
John Garofalo.
Here.
Pat Geyer.
Here.
Greg Gariello. Me, I'm Don Kupka, present. Lindsay Liss.
Here.
Dee Ortner.
Here.
Carlin Reed.
Present.
Paul Rodriguez.
Present.
Kwasi Sadruzman.
Here.
Sri Tupel. Absent. And Lois Wassoff.
Present.
Thank you. Anthony, you're online, is that right?
Yeah. I see him.
Yeah, I'm here for a few minutes, yes.
Okay, and Liz is in the room, and Mary Hartman's in the room. Thank you.
Okay, public comment. No public comment in the room. Anybody online? No one, Liz? Okay, we'll check back in, see if anybody's joined later. The first substantive meeting on the agenda is a debrief on our joint meeting with the Select Board last Monday, July the 8th. I put together a slide just summarizing the action items that we captured from that meeting. Recall that we had 4 topics of discussion. I won't read through the slide, but I'll invite discussion or clarifying questions or reactions from the committee. Colin.
One of the questions that was asked was how much is in the recreation fund, and we got some approximations of the dollar amounts. I did some digging in my records from the Recreation Commission as the former liaison, and I found out that the Recreation Fund has grown from $602,000 to $1.84 thousand from 2014 to 2023. There was a big jump in the Recreation Fund in 2022, probably due to the COVID payment for daycare. I also saw that this is from a report that Carrie LaFleur had presented to the Recreation Commission on November 28, 2023. In that report, it shows the town's auditors have expressed concerns about the growing balance of the Recreation Fund since fiscal year 2018, because the rec program have no long-term liabilities. And finally, it shows that every year from fiscal year 2021 on up, revenues have exceeded expenses. So I wanted to add that as part of the record here.
Thank you, Colin. Good additional information. Other thoughts on the Recreation Fund discussion or any other discussion from last Monday? Lois?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question of the Finance Department. Do we have an update if those figures are as of 2023? Do we have an idea of what the figures are as of now?
I can look that up and we can just circle back in a few minutes.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'll note on the fund, the big next step to come out of that was the town manager was going to work with the Recreation Department staff on a plan, and they're aiming to deliver their output by the end of the summer. So we should have that information going into the budget.
Is this a good time to ask some clarifying questions about pilot programs of Anthony, or is it better to wait until we hear like the outcome of the research that Mary Hartman's group is doing?
I think it's fair to ask now. Anthony, are you up for some questions on the pilot?
It's kind of more about your experience in Brookline. So I was,
Okay.
so can you give some more context as to why Brookline, I think they applied the same policy to all types of nonprofits in Brookline. Do you know why they did the same policy kind of regardless of kind of use of municipal services? Like I would think like a land trust uses services differently than a school, for example. You know, so do you know why they applied the same policy across all nonprofits?
Yeah, I can get more information on it, Lindsay, but I think what they did is they looked at the services that were in common to everybody, and that's police, fire, and public works. And that's where that 25%, I don't have the document in front of me, but it's one of, I think it's number one or number two, on what they try to recover as part of, from what the assessed value would be on that. So that's kind of the goal that they use, is they just look at the basic public services. So they don't include schools because
Or I
they
mean
don't-
like
those
private schools?
nonprofits.
Okay, so.
Sorry?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, that's fine.
So it was more based on services available to the different nonprofits rather than use of those services?
I wouldn't just say services available, I say services that everybody uses and takes advantage of and maybe just doesn't realize it. You know, we plow roads, that keeps businesses open and nonprofits open. There's police and fire services that, you know, will do fire inspections and fire alarm testing at public-private schools as well as public schools. Police, fire respond to those, so they are using those services.
Okay. And then do pilot programs apply to nonprofits that rent town properties?
It applies to everybody, and I think that
Everybody,
was the
okay.
purpose of creating a policy. It's something that could be applied evenly across the board to all nonprofits.
Okay. And then to your knowledge, did anybody in Brookline negotiate their rate down from the 25%?
So they were very flexible, and what the former finance director there did was he entered into, for some nonprofits, so they entered into a contract with them. And some that, you know, would be an undue hardship to just ask them to pay the amount that we was looking for. They negotiated it and ramped it up over the course of 5 years and so forth. So there was negotiation that went back and forth. You know, some larger institutions, you know, BU as an example, you know, they didn't necessarily need to, you know, go into the level that maybe some of the smaller nonprofits, but they tried to work with everybody to recover it.
Okay. Thank you.
Circling back
Yes.
to the recreation fund, the balance at the end of FY '24, so June 30th, 2024, was $2,160,766.46.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, any further discussion on last Monday's meeting? Mary? Oh, yes, on the policy work group. Anthony's coming out of that, the big next step, Anthony's gonna lead a work group with Mary Hartman, the chair of the select board, and Lois from the finance committee, and they're aiming to deliver their output by November the 1st. That's the big date there.
Would this include the expenses side too? Because the meeting, they were unaware what is the expenses on their recreation. That's what they were struggling with, I guess. In the meeting, in terms of, they didn't know what was, you know, the annual expenses.
Oh, the November 1st date relates to the pilot
Okay.
program, not
Oh,
the
yeah, okay.
recreation fund. I think that's a very good question about the recreation department expenses, and it is you're right, that's something we should be tracking as a follow-up, because we were told that the town would give us a better read on the actual expenses of the rec department. And part of that is potentially, and it's something we can talk about in relation to other things too, but allocating the rec department, like other enterprise funds and activities in town, gets services from the town. And one of the things that I know Eric and I talked about is starting to ask questions about tracking those by budget unit, getting a sense of how those can be, in effect, charged back, at least as an accounting matter, so that we understand where the money's going and where the benefit's going.
But that's a great follow-up, Sri. Liz, who would be the appropriate person to take that back to? I don't know who on the staff is going to be working on that in the town manager's office, but just ensuring expenses are part of the planning.
Yes, of course. I will make sure that that is conveyed to the appropriate parties.
Okay. Okay.
Eric,
Yes, Peggy.
it's Peggy. Yeah, just briefly. I think, well, it's only been 2 weeks since our last meeting, and I think our follow-up items are, were pretty clear in terms of looking at inventory of recreational properties, looking at what the break even is every year, and trying to figure out how, or, is the current balance in the revolving fund the right number? And if it's not, how do we bring it down appropriately? So it's only been 2 weeks, and I think those were really good questions from the last meeting.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay. We'll move forward back to our agenda. The next item on our agenda is looking at, on the agenda, it's the FY26 budget process. It's specifically an important initial step in that process, our information requests to the budget units. We've traditionally done this via letters that we've sent to the budget units into Minuteman. I included in your packets the letters we used last year. I wanted to take a look at the process and then the letters themselves and align on how we'd like to proceed this year. Okay? So the letters themselves, like I said, they're in your packets. I won't pull up an example here. I'll go to, I teed up just a quick slide on some of the considerations that I'll share on screen now. And this is important for 3 of our big deliverables. It's important for the guideline process, certainly, probably most importantly. It's important for our 5-year tax projection. That's another FinCom deliverable. And then by extension, it's important for our annual report. It takes center stage in our annual report.
And I'd also add to that it's important, maybe that's part of what you just said, it's very important to inform our review of the warrant articles, which then gets reflected in the annual report. So it sets it gives us a basic set of information tools that we can use to do all those things.
Thank you, Lois. In the context of the guideline process, these letters, or the responses to these letters as an input to the guideline process, Lindsay is going to facilitate the discussion on the letters, on the process, and on what's in the letters themselves.
Right. So what we heard from the school committee last month was that timing is tricky for the fall, right? And that it's difficult to put together both draft budgets and 5-year projections for an October-November kind of time frame. They don't have all the information they need. So I was trying to think, are there ways that we can kind of meet out our request, make our requests less onerous on the schools and the town for the fall in particular, and maybe we can get some of these bigger items fully baked later in the process before the hearings, in the winter sometime. So just trying to think of the things that would be really helpful for guidelines, and maybe we just say, okay, we're requesting all these items, but the things we really need by October, November are as follows, and maybe think of it that way. So I listed out some things that I think would be helpful for us to have in the fall. And so maybe they get these things to us in the fall, and then when they can, they get us the rest of the items. So I listed out some things that I think would be helpful, and I'd be interested in your input. So for the schools, and I know we can kind of calculate these things ourselves, like expected enrollments for CPS and CCRSD, both, and the enrollment shifts between Concord and Carlisle for CCRSD. both like what we saw this year and how it's changing for this upcoming year. That would be really helpful because with the guidelines, something we heard from the schools last year was that they didn't have enough. The guideline didn't reflect that there were changes in the enrollment, right? That Concord actually had more students this year, or got more students than Carlisle at the high school. And if we had known that, or if we'd had more detail on that, I think we would have adjusted the guideline accordingly. So I'd love to have that information. Percent of spending that is subject to guidelines that's expected to be human capital. I think this should probably be the same as last year, because this is helpful to know that how inflation is affecting their expenses, because human capital has different projected inflation rate than goods inflation, right? And so when we're trying to figure out what is going to happen to expenses overall, should happen to expenses overall for our guideline, it's helpful to know, is the share of human capital changing significantly, because the inflation rates are different there. So that would be helpful to know for the town and the schools for any parts of their budget that are subject to guidelines. And then just big changes. Do they know of some of big things that are happening? Because we can look at the most recent budget and make reasonable estimates of what might happen this year. But if there's something big that's changing that we wouldn't know about, we would love to know that. So I kind of said maybe budget line items that you know are going to go up or down by more than 10%. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of just throwing that out there. And then are there parts of the budget that there's no visibility on, that you won't know until maybe December, January, or later? And so, like, it would be helpful to know, are there big voids that they can't control for, that they have no visibility on? And that, that's risk to them, right? That we want to know about, and then we can bake into our guideline, maybe some cushion for that, right? So these are the kind of things I think would be helpful to know this fall before we settle on our guideline. And then when they can get the projections of those. Is there any feedback on that? I don't know.
I had a question. Last year's, was there anything surprising which came out from the school budget, which we can, which probably are scratching our heads and saying, how did this come in, type of thing? Was that? I don't.
The enrollment, I'm trying to remember, I think the enrollment shift, we didn't hear about right away. We learned about it during the process, but we didn't know about it at the beginning of the process. I don't know that they could have given us a heads up, but maybe they could have.
Thought we knew and we did.
Yeah, there was definitely
a miscommunication.
Yeah, no question. And my recollection, and Lindsay, maybe I'm wrong, was one of the things that they said, that I'm remembering, they said had an impact that I don't remember them telling us about, had to do with transportation costs for special ed.
Yeah, that was unforeseen. Yeah, it's transportation costs for special ed. Also, the shelter and some of the expenses there. They didn't know when they were going to get reimbursed. I think that was more of a cash issue.
And that came up a little later.
And then special ed in general, I think, is hard for them to know, right?
And it was particularly the transportation for the special ed students. I think they had a sense of how many students they were sending out of district, but the cost of transporting them.
And how much the state was going to reimburse them.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but can we put those type of examples so that it triggers?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
so they know what we're
looking
about.
for. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Great
Good
idea.
idea.
Good idea.
Don?
Lindsay, I think this year there are two big unusual items. One is the opening of the new middle school and closing of another. And so there's some overlapping costs, some one-time cost associated with that. And the other big item would be that we could ask for the status of any labor negotiations.
Yeah.
Just echoing what Don said, we should, I don't know how this affects the way we frame the request, but there are savings that we are expecting to come from the consolidation.
Right, like
of
$500,000.
the school, and we'd like to see those reflected. We'd like to understand, are those hitting? They may not all be hitting at once. They're not going to have a full budget year in the new facility, but I don't want that to get lost. The idea that they should be being specific with us about those savings that they realized, so that it's a little different from the expectations that were built on the two middle schools. We've been told the overall cost is going to go down. We should be seeing that reflected.
But isn't some of that already baked into your 5-year projection? Some of this, that was my understanding.
Yeah, yes, but it was never clear when it was going to start to hit. It kept moving out.
John?
That's my recollection.
Question, comment, does the town have the same constraints as a school? So could the town produce all this information and then we can kind of tackle that while we're waiting for the schools to deliver their information?
That's a good point.
And then, two, since I think we should respect the school has difficulty getting us information this early. In the past, we've asked for metrics which haven't really, I think, been thoroughly flushed out. Metrics are backwards looking, so you can kind of do them anytime you want. So maybe we can ask for the data in November, but the metrics in September or something, so that we can start looking at that data, whether it's spend per pupil or spend per teacher, whatever it is. But you know, that they can do anytime. I mean, it takes time, but maybe, you know, to help spread everything out. Those are 2 points.
Dee, and then Colin.
And then, well, do we want to answer that question about the town? If they, like, so, you know, or should we table that?
I think the town has.
Or, I mean, so, I know I'm saying, does the town want to address that question
Yeah,
now?
Liz or Anthony?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Anthony's still with us, but I would suggest the finance team having a discussion and see if we have some of the same constraints. And we can get back to it at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing that stands out is right now, we're still in negotiations with 3 out of our 4 unions. The fire department goes through the rest of this fiscal year, and that's an unknown right now unless it gets settled by the fall.
Okay. Dee?
Okay. In listening to Lindsay, in listening to how you've broken out the information that you're looking for, I really like your planning aspect of this. What I'm also hearing, though, is that how the kind of information we want and how we can best obtain this, it sounds to me like we're really looking at a continuous dialogue. So a continuous dialogue between the Finance Committee and the School Committee, a continuous dialogue between the Finance Committee and the town. And, you know, almost like a monthly occurrence that, or maybe not monthly, but, you know, a periodic occurrence. And so that we both sides have an understanding that, gee, we need the information, we don't have it yet. How do we best make this fit? And so I'd like to suggest that, yes, we need to have guidelines. Yes, and our guidelines might be updated throughout the year as well, or as much as we can, but that we also embark on this dialogue with each of the groups so that we have a better understanding and a relevant understanding rather than a baseline that isn't quite meeting the needs that we want to have first.
Right.
So that would be my suggestion.
I think that's a great suggestion, Dee, and I think about this as you said, it's the start of a process. It's not we lob a letter over the fence, and if they don't send us everything we ask for, then it's a failed process. I think I would like to think it goes without saying that they can send us what they have with commitment to get us more information later, or if they can't respond to every letter of our request, maybe they could give us something else that gets us most of the way there. I think it's reasonable, take a reasonable approach to this.
And is there any opportunity, because town meeting isn't going to happen until June 1st, can we delay? Or how do you look, how are you looking at the process right now?
I think we looked to see how much we could delay, and we can't delay too much, right, based on the bylaws? or we couldn't move our final guideline to January, for example.
You cannot.
No, which I was hoping we could, but.
Yeah, what we, and I included a line about timing. What my goal in starting the process and getting the letters out is we'll give the budget units a heads up now in July that we're working on the letters, that the letters are coming, with the expectation that we'll hit send on the letters in August, requesting a response in October. So they would have 2 full months to start to compile a response. And we'd have them in October to talk through what they've provided so far and ask clarifying questions.
And then it would continue.
It would
after
continue,
that.
yeah.
Right, because you will not have all the information in October.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Right.
okay.
'Cause we're still going to vote on the final guidelines in December. So we do have till December.
We do have to do that? Can we?
So the deadline is mid-January for issuing guidelines, right? That's a town bylaw or
Right.
something.
It has to be,
And there wasn't enough time.
yeah, it's in the bylaw.
Okay.
It's spelled out in the bylaws.
Well, we should also be looking at, do we want to actually have an article at town meeting on changing bylaws? I think we can examine that. We can at least knock our heads out trying to think about things like that. Just a thought.
Colin?
Okay, 2 things. First, you said the phrase, Lindsay, human capital. I'm not real familiar with exactly what you mean by that.
Oh, yeah,
Can
just,
you flesh that out? This is
yeah.
because they're going to be watching this video. saying,
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what does she mean by human capital?
Oh, yeah.
That's the first.
Okay, so people, I guess the cost of people, which is the majority, it's about 80% of cost for the town and schools is in people. And so, and paying salaries and wages, right? So,
Does that include pensions?
so I'm sorry, I'm talking about, everything I'm talking about is things that are subject to guidelines. So for spending subject to guidelines, it's about 80% of expenses are in people. And so pensions are not subject to guidelines.
Okay, good. And the last thing is on the letter itself. Do you want to talk about that? Because I have one suggestion to add to that. The letter that was included in the packet for the metrics had level services rate and real personal income. I would suggest that you do, as we did last year, which was also include the nominal
Yes.
personal income. So you have the 3
The
metrics.
3 metric, that's what we're thinking, or that's what I'll bring forth next month.
Thanks, that's it.
Okay, Don?
I was just going to suggest that since we heard from the schools that it's difficult to do this,
Yes.
that we have our own obligation, that we include a little explanation
Yes.
of why we,
That we would love to push this out, but we can't,
in order to meet our
Right, but in order to
obligations
meet,
per the.
right, per the bylaw.
Bylaw, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Ozzy.
I guess, Lindsay, I'm trying to understand, like, having this information piecemeal,
Yeah.
what are we trying to really get? You know, I mean, I guess what I heard is any big surprises, right?
Well, I guess trying to get more visibility into what the town and schools are expecting that they're going to see, and what are they expecting to bring forth for their budget without giving us a budget? Like, are there big things that they kind of know about now that are going to affect the budget that they can tell us about now, even though they haven't put together the whole budget yet? Because it would be helpful so we have ability, obviously the overall guideline is really important, but we have ability to have different guidelines for the town versus CCRSD versus CPS. We always give 3, so we could, in theory, give more to CCRSD if they have some kind of big, change to their budget versus last year. That's like that we have visibility into before we set the guideline, right? So we could give more to one unit versus another. So it's helpful for us to have some sense of this so that we can be as reasonable as possible and work as partners with the operating units as much as possible.
But then is this
Then
creating more work for, us?
For us?
Right, and at the end of the day, they may not put much thought into anything in October. They wait until November, December, and we're working with numbers that are not meaningful.
Yeah, well, hopefully, we'll get as much as we can, to do the best job we can. That's all we can do, I guess. But like you said, if it's a dialogue and they're giving us as much as they can and we're gonna do as best as we can, I mean, I don't know if we can do much more than that.
Eric, Paul has his hand raised.
Paul, thank you, Liz. Paul?
I really like the idea that this is pretty across of just kind of like a open hand of correspondence and working together to like figure out the best way to do the guidelines prior to doing them. Like, I think it sends a great message. Whether they take you up on it or not is up to them.
Great.
Other thoughts? Dee?
Yeah, just one more question, which is the opening of the new middle school. Do you, if everything goes fine, I guess numbers would kind of go fine as well, but do you have any concerns or have you heard anything about if there are delays or the impacts of changes or things like that with regards to the middle school?
I don't know, do we have a liaison update for middle school?
We have a liaison who's for the
Suresh?
construction, right?
Right.
Or the school committee, they might have, those liaisons might have.
I think, if I'm remembering right, wasn't there a report on that, Mary, at the select board meeting?
What?
Of the progress of the construction of the middle school? Yeah, I remember it was a very positive report on how the construction is going.
The delay will be with the solar panels, those are gonna be delayed, but not the school.
I can do a quick update from today's middle school building committee meeting that I watched. The middle school is 63% complete construction. They're still under budget. There's a delay regarding the canopy, and because of that, there's going to be a charge of, I've forgotten how much, to install posts and cameras for security purposes. But that charge will eventually be assigned to the light plant and will come out of ratepayer funds, so will not affect the actual budget. And it looked like there was about $9 million left in the contingency fund at this point, at 63% complete.
Okay. Anyone else on the letters? What I'll propose on next steps is on behalf of the finance committee, it's my sense of the committee that we're in sync on this. I will alert the budget units as well as Minuteman that we're working on the letters and we expect to be in a position to send them in August. And I will take a crack at drafting letters. There'll be some placeholders and there's going to be some open, it's definitely not going to be ready to send. But based on the discussion we just had, I'll take a crack at drafting letters. And Lindsay, I'd ask if we could,
Sure.
once I have it drafted, we could work together to refine them.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And bring them to our next meeting, our August meeting, so that as a committee, we can take a final look, make it, certainly open to adjustments, and then get them finalized and sent shortly thereafter.
And then, John had mentioned that we asked for metrics later on, at some point in the year. If there are future letters that include items that maybe we can request earlier, I think that's a great idea to maybe put all of the requests in one spot and say, if there's any of these things that you can tackle earlier, we'd really appreciate it. I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yep.
Dawn?
Eric, I would just reiterate John's comment and say I think we should request per pupil spending and the trends for the last 5 years in that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Okay.
That, I actually think that's a critical piece of information because we have been in a period of declining enrollments and projected further declining enrollments. We need that information to evaluate to the extent to which that might have an impact on future budgets. So I totally agree, Tom.
And that one actually could affect, what we think for guidelines too. So
Yeah.
having that earlier
It really
would be
could.
really helpful.
Okay. Well, thank you all. So I've got my homework on the letters. Before we proceed, anybody online any non-finance committee members wish to offer comment on the discussion we just had? or ideas on the letters, any public input.
Cynthia Rainey, she stood again, you got her.
He put her hand down.
Okay,
She
we're
did
good.
Put her hand down.
Okay, we're good online?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cynthia, good.
So I just wanted to let you know that I am listening and I will take everything back. But I don't think there's any big surprises in your discussion. When is your next meeting? The date of that?
August 22nd.
We're going to cover that. As posted, it's August 22nd, but I was going to share in the liaison reports that we're going to be having another joint meeting with the Select Board on August 19th to discuss the capital
Right.
planning process.
Right, and we're going to be there.
My hope is to piggyback on that and meet as a finance committee either before or after, so we don't have to meet twice in 1 week in
Gotcha.
August. Okay,
Okay.
so August 19th.
Good. So,
Mary,
and then my only other comment was going to be that an important part of this, especially for the schools, is for us to get a good feeling as to what that capital planning process is going to be. Because this will be a change for us. So it will have an impact to the operating budget and how we're going to borrow, et cetera, for tier 2.
okay, so the timing of that joint meeting is good.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Mary,
Can I make a comment?
please.
There's no word to say. Just give me a minute, I'll be fine. Thank you. My name is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green, Unit 6. I'm the chair of the Select Board. I'm here speaking on my own behalf. Every year at our town meeting, we approve an article that requires anybody who requests money from the town to identify a source. It's a sleeper article. It's usually on the consent agenda. What I heard last week, I was at a conference call with the Collins Center for Municipal Government, and the people there were talking, and I learned that in some towns, they use that article or that idea to require that if anybody comes in with a budget over the guideline, and they say specifically the finance guideline, that they also recommend where the overage is going to come from. So as part of their article, they would have to identify either a source of someplace else where we'd make cuts, another revenue source, maybe free cash, but part of that overage would have to be a proposal, where's the money coming from, so that we stay within the guideline and we get out of this practice that we have where we just keep layering on top and top and top of the guideline. So I thought that was interesting that towns are doing that. I know one of the towns that's doing that is Brookline. It seems like Brookline's way ahead of us in a lot of places. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. You might want to mention that in the letter. I don't know if you want to go all the way to when you're actually negotiating the guideline or when you get to town meeting. But I thought I'd bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay. Back to our agenda, review the Finance Committee schedule. The schedule, I sent out the latest draft of the schedule. It continues to evolve a bit, though I think we're pretty much there. What I'm sharing, now the schedule is spread across 2 slides. I'm showing the first of the 2 slides on screen now. A few modifications since we last took a look at this, and the changes are reflected in yellow highlights. The first one is new, so this is not reflected in the version of this that was sent out in your packets. I made this after thinking through the letter that we just talked about, and that is I moved up that step in August, finalize and send the letters. We originally had that in September, but I think we should aim to get it out earlier. And I think we're on track to do that based on tonight's discussion and the action items we took. So I moved that from September up to August.
Question?
Yes,
Be
Colin.
your intent to send the letter before the August 19 joint meeting with the school committee and the select board, or after August 19?
It would be after, because we'll take a look at the draft that I prep in consultation with Lindsay, and I'm sure there'll be changes, so it'll have to be after that. Dawn.
I'm thinking about the point Mary just raised and wondering if that shouldn't be a topic for that joint meeting as well. And if we want to adopt that practice, what would be the process?
Is it a change to our bylaw?
I guess that's a question maybe we can ask Anthony to get back to us about, and then we could put that on the table together with the budget groups, but, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think we can ask whatever we want in the letter. We can include whatever we want. The question is under what authority can we require things? But yeah, great suggestion, Dawn. So back to the schedule. I'll go to the next slide because there's some additional changes there. We've aligned with the select board on the dates for the public hearings. We adjusted those dates a few times, and I think we reached a really good compromise on the dates. We didn't want them to be too early because we've got to wait for people to get their warrant in the mail, but we didn't want to hold them too late because we'd be scrambling to take our votes, and we've got to produce the annual report. So we've settled on 3 public hearings for the FinCom, which is tradition. April 10th, April 15th, and then May 1st.
It's going
Colin.
to be really important that we have that warrant posted online on April 1st, so that we as FinCom, as well as everybody else, gets a chance to look at it even before it comes to our household. And I'm directing that over to the Finance Department. So please get it online as quickly. Wendy Ravelli made that point too during the Select Board meeting, and I couldn't more wholeheartedly support that. I think that's a great approach.
Okay. Any comments or discussion on the schedule? Okay, we'll get this this newest version posted. I do expect it'll continue to evolve a bit, which is okay. Our goals with this recall are to just be transparent about the steps we're tracking towards, and for our own sake, so we have a sense of what our meeting dates are.
I can't read the change on the first page, but the change you're making will include the August 19th meeting.
Yes, that was a late breaking change that I will make that change too. Thank you, Lois. That's our August meeting, as we just discussed. We'll cancel we'll move the meeting on the 22nd to the 19th. We'll piggyback on the joint meeting so we don't have to meet twice in 1 week. Okay, so that's the schedule. Liaison reports. Thanks to everybody who sent their updates over in advance. We're trying a new approach in the interest of keeping things efficient. I get a lot of value out of these. I know other members do as well, but it does take up a lot of time to share these verbally in the meetings. So our hope is we can still get the information we need, but move things along a bit. So I distributed the compiled report earlier. I trust that everybody had a chance to take a look. I'll open it up to anybody who may have a liaison update that we weren't able to capture in the written report, and any clarifying questions or discussion that you want to have about the updates. And I'll start with Dawn.
Thank you, Eric. So my update is on the MCI Concord closure, and there are a couple of bullet points here. One is that the passage of the state budget will start the clock ticking on a couple of important milestones. The first one is within 30 days, the state has to propose the terms under which they would transfer the wastewater treatment plant to Concord. That plant has to be kept operating to support 3 state buildings. I'm going to flag to the select board that we might want to consider a separate enterprise fund or something for it, so that the rest of the ratepayers aren't subsidizing that plant. It was built in 1975. Secondly, within 45 days, there have to be 4 public informational meetings, so there'll be a lot of information opportunity to share with the public here. The third bullet here is that state is leaning strongly toward not transferring the property to Concord or doing a joint partnership, development partnership, but rather directly issuing RFPs for redevelopment. And the state has 2 priorities, those being housing and the climate crisis. And they recognize that we may have other priorities like economic development, and it seems as though our big opportunity here to influence what will happen will be through zoning. So I think that the zoning that we as a committee may want to influence zoning in order to have a say at the table here. Secondly, they issued a very high-level schedule that shows the zoning and regulatory changes that we want to implement for this, beginning now and running through next year. Then they have a competitive selection process in 26, permitting and construction in 27 and 28. That's basically the timeline. I think also we should think through public services that we have to provide to an empty site. They couldn't commit to even having an on-site guard. They don't know yet, but I can't imagine what the police. It's something that we'll have to be mindful of, and if the burden falls to the town, it would be huge. Yes, Lois?
Don, is somebody from the planning board attending these
Yes.
meetings? Okay, so, because the zoning piece, we can.
Linda Miller's on the committee.
Great.
That's great.
Oh,
Yeah.
terrific, that's great, yeah. Because that's where that has to come. We might make suggestions, but that's.
True, but I think we'll have to influence to the extent that we would like to see additional tax revenue other than residential property tax.
Yeah.
We'll have to present that to the
Yeah,
planning board.
Don, how's this going to work? MCI Concord right now is already zoned as Industrial Park A.
Yeah.
And under the uses of under the planning bylaws, zoning bylaws, residential is not one of the allowable uses.
Right,
So that means we're going to have a zoning bylaw change.
Correct.
And that'll have to go through town meeting, won't it?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not just our committee or the
Oh, no.
MCI committee. The town meeting's going to be involved in this whole process as well.
That's right.
So there's going to be a massive communication effort on why we want whatever piece of it.
Yep. Yep, you've exactly hit the nail on the head that this is going to be a long process, but we have to get ahead of it. Yep.
Yeah, that's why I was in the planning board meeting, and they said it's going to be a very long process, at least a couple of years before we get to, because there's a lot of moving parts on this.
Yeah, and our ability to influence, though, is early, though, because they'll be putting it out to competitive.
No, I think they want a mixed use too, because what I heard, the sentiments from the, you could sense it, they just didn't want it industrial. So I think it's going to be a long process, because they said it has to go through the town meeting, the committees, multiple meetings, and then they'll decide.
Colin?
An update, I had done an update on Warner's Pond. This evening, they met again, and the big deal with Warner's Pond, they had been urgently considering 3 options: dam removal, dredging, and the status quo. They were also thinking about doing a 4th option, which they were calling the side channel. But after a brief discussion by their current consultant, EA, who basically said, no, this is not a good idea for a number of reasons, the committee has chosen to just have 3 work groups and focus on just those 3 options, and they've assigned people to those work groups. The work groups will meet at some point and then get back to the full committee for Warner's Pond Task Force and give some results about the 3 various options. So they're now just looking at dredging, dam removal, and doing the status quo. That was one update. The other update I have is on Public Works. The commission is not meeting this summer, but as you can tell from the select board meeting, The Public Works Department is moving full ahead with a couple of big projects. One is the solid waste recycling curb program. They're going to be giving an update at Monday's Select Board meeting. And the other thing is that there's going to be an update on the Giroux Park project closeout. So even though the commission's not meeting, the department's still being very active with construction and everything else. That's it.
Thank you, Colin. Dee?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back with Don for a minute. And it sounds as though there are a lot of moving parts, but would our town be interested in a special town meeting to speed up the process? If we wait until town meeting, we lose months. Now, I know this is years in the making, this whole project, but has any thought been given to that?
I think that's to be determined. I think that to expand on why I think this is important to be ahead of, is that we want to be influencing the state when they issue their RFPs. So they'll have the designers, the developer selection, they'll hold that themselves. But what it is that's in the RFP will be a function of zoning as well as the state's priorities of housing and clean energy. But if we want something like, as was brought up at the meeting, a soccer field, we'll have to be clear about that up front and zone it appropriately so that it can't become something else. So all of that will have to happen quickly. Peggy, yeah.
Okay. Peggy, online.
Yes, I'm going back to the MCI. Don, does our zoning supersede what the state would determine? For example, if we zone it for recreation and open space, can the state come in and supersede that with residential, which I've read about in the Globe, they think that should be the primary use? And secondly, on the wastewater treatment plant, which the town would love to have more capacity, but will that capacity be basically used up by residential on the site?
So to your second question first, I would say probably. I don't think we should think of it as additional capacity for the existing community, but rather capacity to serve the redeveloped area. But to your question of whether the state could override our zoning, I don't know. They have, though, sort of stressed that that's our voice is to be expressed through that, and that at every step along the way they hope that we're holding hands together. So that, in other words, that's a way of saying they hope we wouldn't propose a change in zoning that they don't agree with. So we'll have to see.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other late-breaking liaison updates or clarifying questions about the report? One housekeeping update on liaison assignments. With the work of the Concord 250th committee really ramping up, which is to be expected given the festivities that are being planned for next spring. I had taken on that liaison assignment myself, but I'm getting spread a little bit too thin. I wasn't able to keep on track with that. So I've asked Suresh to take on that liaison assignment, and he's agreed. He is in tandem with that, with the middle school building project winding down, as we heard. Suresh is going to step away from that liaison assignment. So he's going to switch from the middle school building committee to Concord 250th. I expect we'll still get updates on the middle school building committee. We've got folks keeping tabs on that. And Suresh, you actually sent over an update that I wasn't able to capture in the report. Would you like to share your liaison update for the middle school building committee? Consider it your swan song as the liaison.
Sure. Yes. But the project seems to be on schedule. And like Carlin mentioned, they had one minor change because of the delay in the canopies, so they are adding some more temporary lights, or could be permanent lights, and also for the cameras to be put on there, because those lights in the parking lot are required as part of the occupancy permit to be issued by the town of Concord for occupancy of the building come, December, January. On the budget side, they have about 31% of the hard cost contingency used. So they've used up this remaining of $3.14 million left there on the hard cost, which is the construction side. And on the soft cost, which is the OPM, FF&E, designer, there's about $611,000 balance in the budget. So right now they have a healthy contingency of about $3.75 million. The project is, construction-wise, building is 63% done, but the building portion is 75% of the total construction cost. So the biggest element that, a surprise could be when they demolish the building, the abatement process, as well as the site work that will follow. And that's to be determined after the building is occupied. So more to come. I might attend as on my own interest every now and then, the building committees. And if somebody has any questions, feel free to ask me.
Okay. Thank you. And thanks again, everybody, for experimenting with this new approach on the liaison report. Correspondence. Any correspondence, Liz?
There is no new correspondence in the packets.
Okay. Minutes. The minutes of our June 20th meeting. Dawn.
Right, the minutes of June 20th are complete and in the packet. Are there any comments?
I just have one comment. Would you please just review the document and make sure that all the Ts are crossed and the dots are dotted? And so the term MS sometimes has a dot after it and sometimes it doesn't. That's a big one, I know. This is a really big request.
Especially since it's in my name, yes, we will definitely look at that.
Right, okay. That, if we're down to the
I
period
know,
after
really,
depreciation,
really.
I think we're doing okay.
I think so too.
Yep.
All right.
We'll make those changes.
So.
So I would like to move that the minutes of September, what date
June.
was it?
June 20th.
That date be approved.
Second?
Oh,
Second.
With a.
Oh, as amended.
as carefully proofread.
Second?
Okay. Any discussion? No. Roll call?
Suresh Bhatia.
Can't hear.
Suresh?
I'm going to abstain because I left the meeting at 7 o'clock, so
Okay.
after the update, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Peggy Briggs?
Aye.
Kathy's absent. Eric?
Yes.
John Garofalo?
Yes.
Pat Guyer?
Yes.
Don Kupka, I'm a yes. Lindsay Liss?
Yes.
Dee Ortner?
Yes.
Carlin Reed?
Aye.
Paul Rodriguez?
I'm going to abstain because I did not attend the meeting.
Okay. And Kwasi Sadruzman?
Abstain. I also had to leave the meeting early.
Okay. Sri Tupel?
Yes.
And Lois Wassoff?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the abstains have it. No, just kidding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10
In
yeses.
finance committee, we worry about our math.
I'm sorry?
We have to worry about our math in the finance
Yeah.
committee.
Right.
We do, we have to watch our numbers, it's true.
Yes.
1, 2, 3 abstentions.
Yeah, and
Are
no,
there any nays?
no nays.
Okay, the motion carries. Before we recap our action items and adjourn, any last public comment here in the room? None, or online?
There's none online.
Okay. So I'll quickly recap our action items. And Liz and I think Anthony dropped, but a lot of these fall to you. I can type them up and send them over too, so you have them handy. Anthony was going to provide some additional information on the pilot experience in Brookline in response to Lindsay's question. Liz took on the action item of identifying the staff who are going to be working on that recreation plan and ensuring that expenses are in their scope. The finance team is going to review or identify and share any constraints they may have in responding to our budget request letter. That's in response to John's point. I am going to give the budget units a heads up that we're working on the letter. We expect it to be sent in August. And I'm going to take a crack at drafting the letter. I'll coordinate with Lindsay, and I'll circulate that draft ahead of our August meeting. Piggybacking on that one, I'll work with staff to formally move our August meeting from the 22nd to the 19th. And Mary, I'll coordinate with you on the timing. Depending upon when the joint meeting happens within the select board meeting, we may want to meet before that or after that. So I'll get back to you on the timing. And then the last one is we asked the staff to look into, and this may be something we take to the moderator as well. So we'll do, I'll reach out to the moderator and I'd ask the staff to look into this as well. Any restrictions or requirements around this idea of a budget neutrality provision in our request letter. The idea that Mary shared, if there's anything we should consider in the bylaws or any restrictions on that. Did I get them all? Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
We have another half hour.
Peggy,
Peggy, you can stay online.
you say, it's okay.
Okay.
Good job.
All those in favor?
I agree with you,
Okay.
sir.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Is,
7:33.